welcome to this week's instalment of the Fit Finance Sessions with me, Henry Elliston, Tom Senecals, and Tim Webb. Hello and welcome. And we have 3 more days before we enter lockdown once more. So it seemed like an excellent excuse to take this chance to talk about lockdown and how that's going to perform on your portfolios. Before we go in, did anybody else notice that Boris Johnson's clearly a big rugby fan and he watched the Six Nations match before coming out to deliver his latest news? I, for one, was very grateful of that because it meant I could watch the rugby uninterrupted. Tom, did you watch the interview on Saturday, and what did you think?
I preferred watching the rugby. I think politically, I think they feel they need to lock down, regardless of your views. I think if other nations are doing it, there's a want to seem to be being proactive. My personal opinion is it's just hurting the economy, and I think we need to get back to as much of normal as possible. But it's happened, and I think market-wise, that's had ramifications. I think you started to see markets sell off in the last week or so as Germany and France went into lockdown, and we're approaching this US election. So I think people are getting a bit jittery. Even the tech stocks have fallen in the US a little bit, but there's been some rebound. I think the main difference is bonds aren't maybe providing the diversification you'd normally expect, and treasuries have also taken a bit of a hit, but that's going to happen when there's sort of wide systemic events going across the globe, but over the long term, as we saw earlier in the year, there'll be lots of panic and investors pile out of things, and then they'll also pile back in once there's more headroom. If you've got cash on the sidelines, it's a better time than what it was. It doesn't mean it's going to be plain sailing and a straight repeat of what happened back in March, but I think there's definitely some opportunities there, given at least we know where we are this time, but it's not as big a sell-off as what we saw earlier in the year.
Yeah, no, I quite agree. Tim, do you think there are any particular shares that we should be looking out for right now? I said to you boys just beforehand that my wife's just been to Waitrose and it's run out of loo roll already. So are there any particular loo roll manufacturers out there that we can go long?
Well, obviously the obvious one is Andrex, but that's not official advice for any listeners, by the way. No, I mean, from what I gather, I think some sectors have been left to continue sort of relatively untouched. I think manufacturing has been sort of told to just continue as it is, if you guys don't correct me on that. So yeah, as Tom said, whilst it is much the same as it was before, it's in sort of in a different flavour, with some things continuing as is. In terms of individual stocks, I mean, no, but I suppose that off the back of that, it's which sectors are being left to continue as is and continue, relatively unscathed. I mean, I saw this morning Ocado has bought a couple of robotics companies, which has pushed things up somewhat, but that's that would happen regardless of what's going on with the lockdown, etc. That's just some fresh news, obviously. No.
Yeah. Well, I think you're right. And of course, always very risky to invest in single stocks rather than a well-diversified portfolio of a multitude of stocks and other asset classes. I think it'd be very interesting. And I think that I personally hope, of course, that we have a vaccine for this very soon. And then, but the reality is there doesn't sound like there's going to be much on that front for the next month or so. I think politically, I think, as Tom said, there was not an awful lot they could do other than to lock down, especially as France, Germany gone into lockdown, Spain. And whilst I think you're right, that economically it's not going to do very well. When you start getting deaths reaching the sort of 400-500 a day, that will cause panic. And of course, it's not very nice seeing lots of people dying So I suspect that they have to do something. And more to the point, I think they were quite worried they were going to run out of beds in hospitals, which they do most winters anyway. So I suppose it doesn't take an awful lot of additional illness to push through that barrier. So who knows? The Nightingale hospitals potentially get used this winter. I think the other thing is that Boris is very keen that we get to spend Christmas with our families. And so I suspect that even if this isn't not a 4-week, but a 6-week lockdown, I wouldn't be at all surprised if we're not free for Christmas. Probably not so we can all go and spend it in a boozer. I don't imagine the nightclubs are going to be open for New Year's Eve, but probably enough to allow us to at least go home and see mum and dad. That's what I'm hoping anyway. Fingers crossed. Otherwise, I suspect also there'll just be mass breaking the law of everyone just saying, well, sorry, I'm going to go and see mum and dad this Christmas. And I don't know how the police are going to deal with that. Who knows? Anyway, Charles, any more to add?
No, I think it's just keeping your wits about you and just staying the course. I think everything will come good in the end. I don't think much has changed previously from an investment point of view when you're investing over the long term from where it was last week. Yes, it affects entry points, but over time, whilst those things help, the strategy is just to stay diversified and stay for the long term. If you panic and change course, that often has the negative effect on the portfolio long term. So the news is always busy, but sticking to the plan always gets you to the right destination.
What a wonderful word of advice there from Tom at the end. So until next week, that's all from us today. Thanks very much for listening, and hopefully stay well, stay safe through lockdown. Speak to you soon. Bye-bye.